My name is Sophia. And I'm Laura. The purpose of this science fair project was to find out how pollution affects our environment. We wanted to investigate further into the topic of pollution and global warming and learn more about the consequences. We chose this topic to raise awareness of an acute problem. We also wanted to show the effect of global warming by polluting an ecozone we created. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, but in just the last 400 years we have managed to pollute the world enough to see the inevitable end. The pollution crisis has become worse than ever before, and it's beginning to destroy vital parts of our planet. Pollution is caused by human activities and damages the quality of our air, water and land. We are all guilty of this crime, and if we don't do anything to our behavior very soon, will the beauty of our planet then be destroyed by the beasts we are?
So what is global warming? Global warming is the increase of the Earth's average temperature. The temperature has varied throughout millions of years, but we can now easily conclude that the world is warmer than ever before. What are the causes of global warming? Human activities causes pollution, which affects the atmosphere and thereby the global climate. Global warming is the side effect of human activities that discharge greenhouse gases by the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil and gases. This phenomenon is called the human-caused greenhouse effect, opposite to the natural greenhouse effect. The human-caused greenhouse effect increases the amount of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen dioxide and chlorofluorocarbon in the atmosphere. In relation to the climate, carbon dioxide and methane are the two most important. Even though they only make up a bit more than 0.4% of the air, they have a central role in the global warming. All in all, human beings are the cause of global warming, and we're also the ones that have to solve it. And if we don't take action soon, it will have disastrous consequences for the climate in the future.
What is the greenhouse effect? Greenhouse gases are gaseous substances which contributes to the warming of our atmosphere by catching infrared rays. Some of these are naturally found in the atmosphere, and these are carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide and methane, while others are caused by human activities like CFC gases. When we talk about the greenhouse effect, there are both the natural and the human-caused greenhouse effect. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are what keep the Earth warm. The sun rays come down to the Earth, and using the greenhouse gases, we hold on and absorb the heat, so we won't freeze to death. Some of the heat is reflected back into the space, so we can keep a balance in the average temperature. This is what we call the natural greenhouse effect. The human-caused greenhouse effect is a little different from the natural one. The concept is the same and it works the same. However, the greenhouse gases are beginning to become denser because of all the gases we humans release directly and indirectly. When the gas becomes denser, it can cause the heat to be trapped on the Earth. This means that the temperature will rise because the heat can't escape from the Earth's atmosphere. Heat comes in, but it can't escape again. The Earth works just like a greenhouse, and this is of course why we call it the greenhouse effect. What is the carbon cycle? Humans, plants, and every other living thing all contain carbon. In the atmosphere, carbon is attached to oxygen, making the gas we all know as carbon dioxide. Plants use carbon dioxide and sunlight to make their own nutrients and to grow. This process is called photosynthesis. During the process, the carbon becomes a part of the plant. When the plant dies, and if it's buried, it can turn into fossil fuels, which are made out of carbon like coal and oil. This process can take millions of years, and when we humans burn off the fossil fuels, it enters the atmosphere as carbon dioxide again. It's an endless cycle which will only make the global warming even worse every time it happens.
What is the ozone layer? The greenhouse gases can cause holes in the ozone layer. Ozone is produced in the atmosphere when ultraviolet light from the sun gets oxygen molecules split up into oxygen atoms. Then the oxygen atom reunites with a new oxygen molecule and becomes ozone, also called O3. Ozone is created and broken down naturally by the sun's radiation. Before humans started releasing a lot of CFC gases, this was a process where there was a balance between the creation and the breakdown of ozone. But now, when the CFC gases breaks down the ozone, the breakdown of it is way too large. The ozone layer is very important for the life on Earth, because it absorbs the dangerous ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Ultraviolet radiation is dangerous, because it hurts animals, humans, and plants. When CFC gases breaks down parts of the layer, the ultraviolet radiation on the Earth's surface increases. This can result in a more frequent occurrence of skin cancer, eye damages, a weakening of human and animal immune system, reduced plant growth, and reduced animal life in the sea.
What are the consequences of global warming? Global warming has many negative consequences, for example the holes in the ozone layer, as Lara just mentioned. Besides that, the climate changes can have other disastrous consequences for the future. How bad depends on how much the temperature will rise, because when the temperature rises, the polar ice will melt, the sea level will rise, and it will also cause more extreme weather. Around the North Pole, it's easy to see the consequences of global warming. The ice melts as the temperature rises. Some places the ice layer gets a lot thinner, and some places the ice totally disappears. The Arctic ice has been reduced 40% since the 70s. Also, the Arctic region is getting relatively warmer than other regions in the world because the snow reflects the sunlight more than other surfaces. When the ice melts, the reflection decreases and the area absorbs more heat. The changes in the Arctic regions affect both human inhabitants and animal life. For example, it's a lot harder to be a fisherman now than 40 years ago. So the basis for living in the Arctic region is reduced. Some of the animals most affected by the melting ice are the polar bears. The polar bears are hunting seals to survive and to feed their offspring. The polar bears use the ice rafts to hunt the seals, but when there are a reduced number of these ice rafts, the hunting becomes very difficult and the polar bears are actually starving. Polar bears, penguins, and other species are in the risk of extinction if the global warming continues.
The rising sea level is also a consequence of the higher temperature that induces melting of the ice in the two polar regions, and from glaciers on mountains around the world. This is a problem for rice farmers in Bangladesh. Often their rice fields are underwater and their crops are lost. Parts of the Netherlands are below sea level and they already have a lot of seawalls and dikes to protect areas against seawater. This might be necessary in many other parts of the world in the future. 100 million people in the world live in areas that are only 1 meter above sea level. These regions can soon be flooded and will disappear. In 2020, the water level will rise around 10 centimeters, and already in 2100, it will rise around 90 centimeters. Many beautiful islands around the world, for example, the Maldives and islands in the Pacific Ocean, will slowly disappear. The highest area in the Maldives is around 2.4 meters above sea level. A consequence of rising sea level is reduced mainland areas, which can lead to overpopulation. Some years ago, scientists predicted that extreme weathers would be one of the consequences of global warming. And that is exactly what has happened the last decades. Heat waves with drought and wildfires are seen more often. Also, heavy precipitation because of low pressure and hurricanes has flooded several areas of the world. The reason for more frequent hurricanes and stormy weather is the increased sea temperature.
What can we do to reduce the CO2 emissions? There are many different ways we can reduce the CO2 emissions. We are now at a point where it's extremely necessary to change the way we live and change our amount of CO2 release. People have already been out thinking brilliant ways to use less electricity and thereby release less carbon dioxide. Some of these could be electric cars using green energy and all in all just reduce our use of electricity. Electric cars are a very positive solution for a healthier environment. As the effects of global warming become more of a concern to people, the use of these cars could become more popular in the years ahead. Electric cars produce fewer greenhouse gases than normal cars, although the cars can make a bit of an environmental damage since its power comes from coal-producing plants. It will still be a lot better than fuel-powered cars. We think that electric cars are a very great solution, and if everyone bought these instead, the CO2 emissions would be reduced drastically.
Green energy is a clean resource of energy that has a much lower environmental impact than the energy resources where you have released CO2. Green energy is way better for the environment, and the best part of it is that it is renewable, so we'll never run out of it. Burning off fossil fuels make up electricity. When you burn off these fossil fuels, it releases a lot of CO2, which pollutes the air and damages the ozone layer. If everyone used less electricity, we could thereby also reduce the amount of the released carbon dioxide.
Hypothesis. We think that by increasing the carbon dioxide level in an artificial ecozone created in the lab, the well-being of plants and insects would be negatively impacted. We also think that we can charge our phone by using green energy.
The experiment. The aim of this experiment was to show how the global warming affects our environment. We also wanted to find a simple way to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases. We did this by making 2 phone chargers powered by green energy. One powered by wind, that one over there, and one powered by solar energy, like that one.
Procedures for our ecosystem, as you see here. First, we made 2 relatively identical artificial ecozones. We then hooked on sensors which measured the temperature, the carbon dioxide level, and the oxygen level in each tank. Then we prepared a 3rd tank, and in this tank, the effect of decay would be observed and measured with oxygen temperature and humidity sensors. After 10 days, 500 milliliters of carbon dioxide and other chemicals was added to one of the artificial ecosystems to simulate the effects of pollution and the global warming process. The well-being of the plants would then be observed and documented. The 2 artificial ecosystems would then be compared through data from the Parkskolen systems and from observation. When the necessary time period has passed, the data would be collected and put into graphs and diagrams. Yes. The data will then be compared closely, and thereby a conclusion could be made based on the experiment.
And now how we made the windmill. And Sophia will turn it on and demonstrate. First, we prepared a fan and a fan blade and a 24-volt engine. We then wired the engine to a car charger where the charger for the phone would be plugged in. A stand for the windmill was then made from a pole and a wooden base. The engine with the fan blade mounted on was then securely fitted onto the stand. The fan was then turned on to make wind for the windmill. We then plugged the phone charger in and connected it to the phone.
Like that. Okay.
And now how we made the solar charger. First, we prepared a solar panel and a 200-watt light. We then wired the solar panel to a car charger where the charger for the phone would be plugged in. The 200 watt light was then turned on and pointed towards the solar panel. We then plugged the phone charger in and connected it to the phone.
Results from the ecozone with decay. The ecozone level rose each day according to the time of the day. This happened due to the humidity level, which caused there to be condensation inside the tank. The condensation would then turn into water, and thereby it watered the plants. This caused the plants to produce more oxygen as it had been giving more and more nutrients. The temperature remained relatively stable but changed slightly according to the time of the day. At night there wasn't, of course, no sun, so thereby it couldn't be warmed up as much. The temperature peaked at the middle of the day when the sun released the strongest UV rays. The humidity level was also relatively stable, but it increased as the temperature rose.
And our ecozone, before we added pollution, the carbon dioxide was very stable, and the oxygen level rose throughout the whole experiment due to photosynthesis. The plants were simply just cancelling out the carbon dioxide in the air. The temperature was also pretty stable, but varied according to the time of the day.
Ecozone 2 after we polluted it. After adding the carbon dioxide and polluting, the CO2 concentration rose dramatically, but after just 6 hours it was stable again. The oxygen level also rose dramatically since it had to cancel out the excessive CO2 level in the air. We observed that the temperature varied according to the oxygen level in the air.
And our ecozone, which is supposed to simulate like a perfect climate, like if it didn't have global warming. And the oxygen level was extremely stable and it barely changed. And the temperature varied quite a bit but remained stable in some way. The temperature dropped slowly at night and rose quickly as the sun rose. The carbon dioxide varied like the temperature, but it kept the same pattern. At night it increased quite a lot, but then dropped down to a lower level.
Conclusion. After the experiment, we can now conclude that our hypothesis was almost right. Since it isn't possible for us to see if the insects are negatively impacted, we can be sure that the hypothesis is 100% right. But we were able to see that some of the plants were beginning to become a little moldy, and some of the flowers started to dry out because of the rising temperature. We can also conclude that it was possible to us to charge our phones with green energy.
And now considerations. The experiment is of course not completely precise. It can only give us an idea of what happens during global warming and how the climate changes. Also, the solar and wind powered chargers, they're also just made to give us an idea. They function, but not as good as a normal phone charger. If we could do this again, we would use the actual wind and sun to power our phones, not electric devices, the fan, and the powerful light.
Credits. We would like to thank our parents for being very supportive and helping us making the wind and solar chargers. We'd like to thank Mikael Johansen and other teachers for helping us through the process of the presentation and for giving us time to work on the project. Louisa Mølgaard Pedersen for helping us with the board and for giving very good feedbacks. Michaela Gogo and Ellen Burkhardt for making this possible and for helping us with the experiments.
And to all of you for being a good audience.